We're going to get started right now. We have an August-sized audience. We've been bumping Harris a couple times to get in, and so this was the first date that we could bring him in. We were just talking about. I had a meeting with someone from RBC yesterday, a senior lender, that said we're on a very busy run of pre-approvals that they haven't seen since about March. And then Harris was just saying that he was talking to someone at BMO, and they're seeing the same thing. So the domino effect is, they go get their pre-approvals first, then they come to us, and then they come to you. And so we're optimistic that we both actually heard the same thing within a couple of days. So that's good. So we're gonna.
I heard it too. If it makes you feel better.
Did you?
Ron Butler told me about it.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Good. No, that's
a lot of online applications.
fantastic. It's we're exploring a relationship with RBC. And that's why they were talking to me about what's going on at the back end of it, and so it's really quite interesting. We'll keep you informed as to if anything develops with them. Harris, welcome. So I'm going to read your bio because it's very detailed. So today, Harris is from Treadstone Law. Treadstone Law is a law firm in Mississauga. They do a lot of real estate. One of the interesting parts of their practice is they can do it without your client actually going in, which is kind of neat. And you were one of the first to do it smoothly, I would say, because it can be fairly clunky, but we've gotten really great feedback from people who have worked with you and your firm.
Yeah.
I'll tell you a little bit about Harris, about his history. He's been in jail. No, I'm just kidding.
I was forced to get a law degree to get myself to get out. Yeah.
So you saw him on the news. So he's a partner at Treadstone Law, where he heads the real estate practice. You started your career at Schulich Business School, where you majored in finance and economics. He spent time working at the head offices of Mercedes-Benz, Jaguar Land Rover's strategy department before you decided to go to law school at Hofstra University on Long Island, New York. After law school, he practiced criminal tax defense in New York City before returning to Canada. So that's quite a varied background. I'm just curious, when I was reading this last week, what caused you to consider a career in law? That looks like it was a hard right turn.
Well, when I first started, I loved where I was working. So I worked at Mercedes-Benz. Was my first kind of job. I loved going and sitting in the cars. And I realized, though, if I was going to keep working there, I wouldn't be able to afford the cars. So to get into a car, I needed to change a profession.
Right.
And to be honest, I wasn't somebody who from day one was particularly gung-ho about becoming a lawyer or anything like that. My dad was a huge influence on me, and he pretty much told me I had to go. I thought I still had a decision. But I worked in the automotive industry, and after some time I needed some change because what kind of scared me was a lot of people in the industry. The cars was great. During lunchtime I could go sit in a $1 million car, but a lot of people were kind of you're repeating the same day in and day out, and that was not something for myself. So I had to find a little bit more of I wouldn't say I'm an adrenaline junkie, but I needed a little bit more action, a little less than jail, but a little bit more than, but it was kind of a type of jail. So that's kind of what got me into law. But to give you kind of a nutshell of who I am as a person, actually when I first started Benz, within, I think, the first 2 months, Mercedes is a very hierarchical kind of organization. So you need to pay your dues as you kind of climb up. And so in the first 2 months, I somehow got into a meeting. We were launching, I don't know if anybody knows the Mercedes models. It's the E-Class. The E-Class is kind of in the middle. And so everybody had to kind of decide. In Mercedes, there's basically a negotiation between marketing and like finance and strategy, and you have to come out with pricing and all this other stuff. So within the first 2 months, we were in a meeting. I was in a meeting with, I think it was the head of marketing and all these other guys, and then after I was sitting in the meeting after 15 minutes, I'm like, you guys are doing it all wrong, because I was negotiating against marketing, and marketing was like, we need to decrease prices and this and that, whatever. I'm like, you're doing it all wrong. You need to look at like this, and they were kind of what the heck is this guy saying, right? He just started 2 months ago. And I was like, you need to look at this strategy, this is where the market's moving, all this other stuff. And at the end, the head of marketing just said, hey, listen, we've been doing this for 10 years, we know the answer. So I stopped, but the good thing was when I got out, word got around the office, and within like 2 weeks, I was working with the CFO and the CEO on other like projects where I was actually able to get insight on the relationship between Daimler and Chrysler, and at that time they were splitting up. So it was because I was a strategy junkie, you could say, that I was like, yo, I need to see how this business works, and it was more of a passion, and I had a little bit of a mouth. Now, fast forward to now, I have a 3-year-old who also got a mouth, so it has to be in the genetics, and I can understand how annoying that could be. So when they said, hey, listen, we know what we're talking about, that's what I kind of tell my 3-year-old son now.
That's funny. No, that's great. You got our attention when you said, you threw us your topic about how to make mistakes and grow your business. And so what made you develop a talk around that subject?
So, first of all, I'm done talking about title insurance. I can't do that anymore. Or any of the legalities. I think there's a lot of information out there. I think you could, a lot of people are privy to it. They can go online and find all of that out. It's not something that I'm good at it, not passionate about it. But I do like business. I do like strategy. And I've spent actually half of my life in the States. I grew up in the States. Moved to Canada, went back for law school, then came back after a little bit of practice there. And I saw that Canada is very good in terms of innovation and a good place to do business and all of that, one of the best places in the world. However, we're not as good as the Americans. The market is very different. And if you look at what that difference is, if you look at different markets, other places may not have enough resources, you may not have the education, the market, the whatever it is. In Canada, you didn't have any of those problems. It was a mindset problem. It was people were very, very risk averse, and that kind of, especially kind of was brought to the forefront in this market when there was a downturn. In a downturn, typically in a downturn, if you look at like 2008 or even now, in the States, some of the biggest businesses were born during the downturn, because people were making mistakes and trying to figure out how they can grow their business. And that wasn't the case here. People kind of they kind of got even more conservative as they saw a little bit of uncertainty. And so my thing was, now's a good time for the people who are dedicated to have a conversation where it's not high level. I don't want it to be very theoretical, right? I want it to be pragmatic so that everybody can leave and thinking like, these are the 3 things I have to do that I can start doing today, tomorrow, and actually improve the business that I've got.
Great. So to add to your experience in the US, I've had the pleasure of being part of a couple of peer groups over the years, and I'm generally the only Canadian, and other brokerages, and we assess each other's brokerages, and we visit each other, and we criticize each other, look at each other's businesses. And the big difference I noticed with the US brokerages is when they table an idea and someone says it's working well for them, it took them 5 minutes to say, we're going to try that too. And maybe we'll do it a little differently because we're from Colorado and you're from New York. Maybe there's some differences, but that sounds really good. Are you making money at it? And they go, yes, we're making money at it. I said, okay, let's do it. And it was so refreshing because here, it would be analyzed for months. Yeah. And I love how and it doesn't mean that they're big risk takers in my opinion, because they start small, but they start. And it goes back to that, my done is better than your planning.
Yep.
Right? Yep. And so I'll leave it to you.
Yeah, no, definitely. To that effect, what I've seen in the States is exactly what you're saying. The spread of ideas is really quick. But even if you were to go into somebody's office and say, hey, listen, I have this idea, do you want to try this out? Everybody's a little bit more forthcoming and they'll say, you know what, I'm not going to invest everything I've got into this, but let's see what I can invest and let's take that first step. And whereas over here, even in the biggest organizations, everybody has to kind of think about it several times. It has to go through 10 different people, and that's kind of the mindset instead of, hey, listen, let me just see what I can do and get this started by the end of the week. I don't have to have everything there. It doesn't have to be a perfect solution. It's kind of like the perspective where where you're a beginning entrepreneur. A lot of people, at least when I was in undergrad, it asked people, everybody wanted to start a business. And when you ask them, like, what would you do to start a business? Everybody's like, well, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to lease an office, and it's going to be like, it's going to have this desk, and it's going to have this stuff, and I'm going to have this pen, and they have all this stuff out there. And I'm like, well, when are you going to actually start the business? Like, after you've spent $1 million, that's when you're going to start the business? It makes no sense, right? Like, the best businesses, they start from your garage. You don't need to have fancy anything. You figure out what's that first step to get this going, to see if this is good enough to work, and then I can maybe take the second step.
That's great. Well, I'll leave it to you to walk down the path with our folks.
Yeah, so I mean, one of the things though I wanted to talk about was being risk averse, and kind of figure out, and at least we'll try to make this more inclusive, so I'm not just speaking at you, in terms of why people are risk averse. I want you to at least think of this more from a critical perspective, take some stuff home with you and kind of understand why you are where you are. I'm not saying you're in the wrong place, but, and what's the next step that you can take, right? So in terms of risk averseness, who here, what's somebody's guess why people are risk averse?
The unknown.
The unknown?
Fear of the unknown.
Yep, I mean, Elon Musk says that starting a business is like, what is it? Chewing glass and looking into the abyss. So it is the unknown. So what prevents people from taking those risks? Other than the unknown, anything else? Money, 100%, yeah.
Fear of loss?
Fear of loss. I would say one of the biggest things, right, from the get-go, and it depends on where you stop. You could stop after high school, undergrad, like me, you go into law school. So for the first 12 to 20 years, you're being taught something. You're being taught not to take risks. You're being taught how to color within the lines. And if you do take a risk, right, you're penalized for it. So I've never heard anybody go into an exam and be like, yeah, you know what, I took this risk on this answer, and let's see where it goes, right? That doesn't happen. And it's not like we're born like that, because I see my kids, they trip, they get back up. They don't get up and look around at who's looking at them, or if they're hurt. They don't care. They get up and they keep doing whatever they want to do. So, and the biggest thing is just keeping them alive, because they're just constantly going out. That's the biggest, right? So they're not like that. But when you go through something for 12 years and you're constantly told, hey, listen, color within the lines, you're trained to do that, right? And so when you're starting a business is not about coloring in the lines. It's about what risk can I take? If I fall down, you get back up. You get knocked down 7, you get back up 8 is what Rocky said. So that's the kind of mindset you need to have. There's that resilience there. There is nothing personal about making a mistake, but we've been taught to make it personal, right? And then what kind of adds to that is the money equation. As you get older, you got family, you've got a lot of people depending on you, you've got a partner or a spouse, somebody that you got to pay rent at the end of the day. So are you able to take a risk? That's something that like a lot of people will basically start questioning. So they find reasons, they've been already trained for 12 years not to take risks. Now you're in an environment to basically say, no, I don't want to. And what ends up happening is whatever you're kind of holding on to the most, you're guaranteed to lose it. So if you see like first-time drivers, you see how tight they hold the steering wheel? Yeah, and they're trying to go straight. You're gonna go anywhere but straight when you're holding it that tight. And so that is what, by not taking risks, right? I'm not telling you to let go of the steering wheel. You're gonna quantify it, but by holding on too tight, you're guaranteed to lose what you have.
Yeah, when you say working to preserve what you have, you're guaranteed to lose it. What do you mean by that? Can you expand on that?
So, who's heard of BlackBerry? Yeah?
Who's watched the movie?
Yeah, so, I mean, I didn't know there was a movie, so I gotta watch this movie now. So, BlackBerry, I remember when I was going back to my Benz days, the Bold came out. It had some shiny outside thing. It was like a leather on the back, and it had the QWERTY keyboard. You had an upholster, which now might look a little bit weird. Back then, it was amazing. I used to have one. You put it in there, you're walking around.
Stop it, I miss my BlackBerry.
No, it was an amazing kind of product. If you look at like the Apple back then, right now you look at it, it's like all screen and it looks nice. Back then it looked pretty ugly. It was not, that first iteration, I think it was 2007. It was not good at all. It was just, looking back at it now, it looked very kind of nasty to me. But BlackBerry, who knows what they're doing today?
Corporate work. They're last 1 in 4 companies is still doing those IT communications.
Yeah, so they have patents that they license out for IT. So they had a lot of patents, they're sitting down and they're kind of working off of that. Now, that company is a very textbook example of holding on to what you've got and then you hold on so hard that you lose it. Now, I'm going to caveat this. I don't think it's completely their fault. I do think that from a political perspective, I can see why maybe a big brother down south would want a company like that to be in the States. However, I do believe that there is a business response that wasn't there. BlackBerry never responded when Apple came out. They said that we've got the QWERTY keyboard. They looked in and they said, you know what, forget about what's going to happen in the future. We've got all these good things that are working for us. We've got a QWERTY keyboard. Our screen is the sharpest. We've got BBM. Who remembers BBM, right? And it was because of the security that BBM had. Barack Obama was the first president who could text, and he had a BlackBerry. Okay, so he was given that approval. So they had all these things, and they said, well, you know what? Even if they're like Apple's a gimmick. Right now they're only in the consumer market. So if you remember back then, even the Apple computers, they were not how Microsoft all corporate. Even though they've kind of made some strides, they're not really there yet, or nowhere near there yet. They're very consumer. So BlackBerry had the same kind of perspective. They said, even if they take the consumer market, we've got the business market down. And one by one, Apple knocked everything down. And they took over the entire market, and then when everything is kind of going downhill is when BlackBerry's come out with a new phone that's now touchscreen. So, and it's a very different kind of corporate mindset, motivation, creativity when you're like, I gotta save a sinking ship, as opposed to I'm already in this mindset and I'm already going out every day and trying to figure that out. So that's one example. I wanna give a second example. Who remembers Blockbuster? Okay. Blockbuster is still open. They have a museum, I think in Alaska or something. I'm not like, so if you want to go check it out, you can. I remember Blockbuster, for myself, was every like Friday, we'd go and rent something and then we'd give it back for the weekend. Who else kind of had that mindset? It was a part of your life. It wasn't something that you just went off once. It was something that was a routine kind of part of your existence. So, Netflix, when it first came out, they started doing this. They'll mail out DVDs, and you could use it as long as you want. When you sent it back, then you can get another DVD. So they had all of this. They were not making money, and they were actually at one point went to Blockbuster and said, we want to buy Netflix? And Blockbuster said no. We don't want any of this stuff. This is like, we have our market, we have brand recognition, we're at every single corner. They were like Tim Hortons at that point. They were everywhere, you could see them. They were like, we don't need you. So Netflix went back and they started streaming and they started getting more creative. They were able to raise more funds. Blockbuster at that time did not sit around and do that. They came up with, I think it was Blockbuster One or something like that, where you could stream, you could rent, you could do all of that in one subscription. They were beating Netflix. So Netflix at that time, the co-founders said that if Blockbuster kept doing that, Netflix would be out of business. They could raise all the money in the world, they would not be able to beat Blockbuster. Because Blockbuster, everybody knew about Blockbuster already, they were already using it. So to go from that to a streaming situation, it's just the next kind of natural step. So what ended up happening was actually, the CEO didn't get his bonus because the board said that this is not paying dividends right away. It was not paying back as quickly as they thought they would. So the CEO left. They replaced that CEO with another CEO that was much more conservative. He was from accounting. Nothing against the accounting background, but he was just more, he was like, this is not making sense. Online's not gonna matter. Streaming is not going anywhere. He axed everything. He's like, our core offering is in-store rentals, and this is where we're going. And that is how they kind of, because they pulled back, even though they're going the right way, because they pulled back, they lost everything. Netflix kind of took over.
Wow. Did he work for Netflix?
Yeah, you could think, but according to the co-founder of Netflix, had they kept going, Netflix would not be here today.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's
so
a great.
one decision kind of killed everything.
That's a great story. And Rogers Video went with them.
Yeah.
They went shortly after.
Yeah.
They were sort of on the heels of Blockbuster.
So there was, and to the conversation, it was people weren't really looking at it and kind of figuring out where is the market going. Even if I don't know where the market's going, what can I do to maybe hedge my bets to see maybe I should try something out and then figure it out and then kind of go with that.
So Blockbuster was probably the closest thing to a monopoly at that time.
Yeah.
When Netflix started. Can you expand on your thoughts for monopolies?
Monopolies, well, I mean, for monopolies, I would say when people or companies are innovating, right? I know, and I'll throw this out, before we kind of, I want to step back a little bit and kind of talk about innovation. When companies are innovating, what do you think that they're thinking about when they innovate? When they're looking at, like, the ones who are doing it well, the ones who are the Apples and the Netflixes and the Ubers and all of that, what are they thinking about when they want to innovate in any form? Any guesses? For the future, how so in the future?
How they can make the client's life more easy.
Customer service. So sorry, what?
Also, like years in the future.
Yeah. So just where the market's going to be.
Yeah.
Yep. Popular answers are other good ones are making a better mousetrap. So if it's just more convenient for you, if it's you want to just make more money. So my question is, if one of you was the only realtor in all of Ontario, would you want to innovate? No.
Market is there, we're happy.
Yeah, so you're going to have a line of business outside. You're not really going to innovate to make a better mousetrap. You're not going to innovate to see what's going on in the future unless it's taken away that control that you have. So the overwhelming kind of perspective that businesses have, investable businesses in Silicon Valley, or their perspective is, how are we going to build a monopoly? So how are we going to make sure that we control that entire market and ensure that we protect that market afterwards? Now, the marketing speak is, yes, we're going to have a better client experience and all of that. That's good. And I'm not saying they don't. They do. But the overwhelming intention behind it is, what's going to happen when we take over the entire market? How do we do that so that nobody can come in? So who's heard of Sam Altman? So he's the founder of ChatGPT. Okay? So he gave a very popular talk, I think a few months ago. He said, if you're starting a business, find a niche and monopolize it. And from there, move outward. It doesn't have to be huge. It has to be something that's decent sized, and then you take it over and then you move forward. Now, in terms of monopolies, other than Uber, when I say monopoly, what kind of companies come to mind?
Telcos.
Telcos, 100%. Has Rogers' service gotten any better over the past 10, 15 years?
Hold times are longer.
Yeah, no, I remember growing up, their hold times were like, it's like 30 minutes and people didn't have a choice. It was insane. So I would say that when, sorry, I just completely lost my train of thought. Yeah, so we're defining monopolies now. So one of the biggest monopolies is Google. They have, I think, 95%. This is a monopoly, as much of a monopoly as you can get. They have 95% of the search engine searches. I think ChatGPT kind of chewed into it a little bit, but I think the estimates were that they probably went down to 85% from 95. So they've got just complete dominance. And so, but if the government comes knocking with any antitrust laws, Google starts defining itself as a tech company, which means it's not a monopoly, but that's a different story. But those are not the only type of monopolies. Automotive companies are monopolies as well. We just don't see it because we think that we have a lot of choice. But in reality, each brand is monopolizing a certain perspective. So if you think of Toyota, what do you think of? You think of a reliable vehicle. That's what you want. A lot of people will say it's an appliance, but it is something that will last. Without a doubt, it will last. They build them so they can last 30 years. You could say Mercedes is I made it type of vehicle. BMW is like very sporty, more you're looking at how you can feel the ground and how you're driving and all of that. So each brand has a monopoly over, not to say people don't cross over, but more or less each brand. Kia or Hyundai, Kia's making some beautiful cars. I think they took the designers from Audi and BMW and their M division, so they're making some beautiful cars, but they're still in the value segment, right? So there's, or youth segment. So do you want to try this new car? Because I know that there's the Elantra, they've got like this N version of it that before Civics used to be, when I was growing up, it was the Civics that were like the SI that people were in high school were changing the exhaust. Now I feel like it's now more of the Hyundais that are kind of taking over in that sense. So there's all these different types of monopolies that people have, and monopolies is what I would argue realtors need to kind of think about when they are looking at their own business. I don't know if I went off question or...
No, that's okay. No, that's okay. You know, I had a mentor tell me once that we were talking about monopolies, and he said anyone who doesn't like monopolies never had one.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. So, no, I mean, our firm, and we are strategy obsessed, so we have a board from, and it's not just lawyers, because lawyers, I don't know if they're the most creative. In certain ways they are, but we've got a board at our firm from Bridgewater, we've got Canon, Skadden, all these individuals from different organizations, mostly in the States, and our perspective is, how do we monopolize the market? How do we build monopolies with our firm?
And so how are you doing that?
So from a step-by-step perspective, so I know I'm talking about a lot of Fortune 500 or startups or a lot of these big companies, and you guys are like, how the heck is that gonna apply to myself? And I'm just kind of like, not just, you are a realtor in one of the largest markets you could say in North America or in the world, I would say, but in a healthy market. So how are you gonna build those, how can you build a monopoly? So your monopoly, first of all, just to define what your monopoly is going to be, I would argue is a monopoly on the attention of your target market, okay? So I know that a lot of people will start thinking that they need to monopolize everybody around them and that everybody, other realtors or anybody else in the industry is their biggest competition. Your biggest competition is not other realtors, your biggest competition is Netflix. Your biggest competition is Uber Eats. It's anything that's on their phone that's grabbing their attention is what is, I mean, I remember the past 2 years, the amount of economists that TikTok is producing, because everybody sees that the Bank of Canada rate went up and down, everybody becomes a real estate expert, and they're like, well, we think this is gonna happen, we're gonna trade this and that, and it's just, it's all of that attention. So your focus has to be, how do I get their attention? Now, before I kind of get into the steps, there is a different market for everyone. If you're starting off, just stepping into this market, it's your friends and family. If you cannot get their attention, I don't know what to say. I know a lot of people are like, you know what, like my friends and family, we're the last person that they would go to for any information. They would not use us, they would use somebody else, this and that. There's a lot of that. And I think that it's because you're not giving them the right information for them to be confident in making the decision in you. I know when I came out of law school, my dad wanted nothing to do with me. He was like, listen, this is what you need to do and to make this done. And I'm like, I think maybe, and he just didn't, but after he got the confidence, now he doesn't ask any questions. He's like, go do this. I don't care how you do it. Don't tell me even. Just get it fixed. So, but it's because he got the right information from me to be able to make that decision. So your friends and family are the first ones. You've known them the most in your life. You need to be able to know and understand how to grab their attention. After that, you're moving into your past clients. So if you've ever worked with anybody, there's so many people who can't keep the attention of somebody. You've spent so much time, especially with realtors, you're driving them around, especially if you've helped them buy a home. You've spent a lot of time. There's a lot of equity, sweat equity that you've put into each client, showing them homes and dealing with their idiosyncrasies. Not that there's anything wrong with what they're saying, but everybody's coming with a different perspective, and you're trying to manage that expectation to kind of help them understand what is happening in the market, and maybe it's not what's happening with what their friends and families told them. So you've spent a lot of equity there. So that is one attention. The next kind of bubble is any referral partnerships that you have that you need to grab their attention. I've seen so many people who say, you know what, I've had a conversation with a financial planner once 6 months ago, and I'm pretty sure he's going to send me a deal. They're not going to remember you in 6 months. So you're looking at, first you're figuring out what your bubble is, and you got to have that well defined. So you're not just running after anybody. You're figuring out what it is, and then you redefine it every 6 months, 3 to 6 months to figure out, is this bubble growing? Do I need to grow with it? What's happening? So once you've got that defined, I would argue there's a 3-step way, 3 steps to building monopolies. 3 easy steps. So the first step would be, you figure out, you have to adopt best practices. So whatever is the best practice in the industry, you have to adopt it. Apple didn't reinvent the phone. They used the same networks. It was the same concept of calling somebody. It was nothing new. Netflix, same thing. They didn't start making videos. They're making movies now. But even those movies, they're just like how you make movies. They did not change anything much. They just changed it a little bit. Innovation is always 10%. It's like Alex said, like you just take a step, right? It's just one step. There's a Chinese parable that is really popular on TikTok and social media. It's about a boy. He's in the forest on his horse. It gets dark. Anybody's heard of this? No? Okay. So there's a boy. He's on a horse. He's in a forest, and it's getting dark. And he starts to panic. Right? Once it gets dark, he's like, I can't see my way out. The horse says, can you see the next step? He says, yes. He says, take that. The point of that is you don't need to see your way out of the forest. You just need to see the next step, because you don't know where you're going to be going. You don't need to, if it was that easy to plan everything out, everybody would have monopolies, which means nobody would have monopolies. So you want to be able to understand where you are and then take that next step. That starts with best practices. So email newsletters. I would argue that newsletters are not the best way to communicate as they're often sent out, but you still need to implement it and then start innovating, because newsletters came out at a time where, imagine like 20 years ago, 30 years ago, where anytime you got information, it was in the mail, and all of a sudden you got email, Gmail, or whatever it was, and you get just this nice email that comes in that tells you all this information. You've monopolized their attention. They're not going to be reading anything for long. But now it's a different game, because you're like every 5 seconds you're getting an email, you're getting pinged nonstop, right? So now it's standing above that. But you need to start sending those emails before you figure out, how am I going to stand above all of this noise? So that's the first step, to making sure that you have the best practices, whether they're newsletters, you could do open houses, door knocking, whatever it is. The best practices, implement those. And then start taking step by step. What's the next step you can take to improve this? Now, step number 2 is, I would say, you have to set up several different moves. So if you have a lot of resources, start with one. So you just take one kind of step that you want to take in one area, and then implement it, research it, and start doing it right away. If you've got a little bit more resources, start maybe with 3. The reason why I say this, and there's ups and downs for both, if you do one iteration, if you fail, you're not going to feel happy about yourself. And so you have to get out of that mindset. You don't take it personally. You get up and you rub that dirt off and you keep going. If it didn't work, analyze why. Maybe it was wrong timing, wrong execution, all of this other stuff. There's I think it was somebody from Shark Tank. They said dreams are free, hustle sold separately. So it's kind of like, it's all in the execution. Everything, you get a good executor, everybody's got great ideas. I talked to a lot of my friends, they're like, you know what, all of our best ideas were stolen. I had this idea 10 years ago. And I'm like, well, what happened to the execution, right? So it's all about execution. So, and the downside of 3 is if one fails, you're like, well, I've got these 2 other. So you have to have a discipline, right? Half of the job is showing up. So you guys showed up here, and it's very tempting to be outside, but half the job is showing up and making sure that you're disciplined enough to keep going. And the last step, and I know this is a long-winded answer, the last step is essentially keep it cheap. And we discussed this earlier. There's a lot of people want to set up that fancy office. They want to make sure everything is just perfect before you need to get things going by the end of the week. How do you implement a newsletter from scratch by the end of the week? How do you do it? You're going to figure out a way. If you're forced to, with a gun to your head, I guarantee you're going to find a way to make the most fantastic newsletter by the end of the week if you're not doing it. Now, who's heard of Amazon Fresh? Anybody? Yep. Okay, so Amazon Fresh, very good example. Amazon Fresh was an automated store. Amazon created this nice kind of concept, and they had 2 stores that they started off, one in Seattle, one in New York City. And what they wanted to do with the I guess, innovative idea was you scan a barcode on your phone from your Amazon account, you walk in the store, pick up whatever items you want, and then you leave with it and you get a receipt. The ads were real slick. If somebody walks in, they grab something, and on the ad, it was like their receipts, they show your receipt, they put it back, the receipt's like, it deducts whatever they put back, and all they were saying was, hey, this is all our AI, and we're able to figure out what you're picking up, and this and that, and whatever. After about 6 months to a year, they closed the entire operation down. And this happened a few months ago. And they said it was not viable. The reality was if you did try to use those stores, you didn't get the receipt right away. You got a receipt 3 hours later. The reason being, they hired 1,000 people in India to watch videos of people picking stuff up and putting it back, and then they would give you a receipt. So that's innovation. So what they did was, how do we get, like, they have so much money. Amazon is one of the richest companies in the world, right? And that's why they can make bigger mistakes. This mistakes probably cost them $5–10 million, but I'm sure that they learned something from it, right? But they did not build out anything that was AI remotely. It was just cameras on top of every shelf, on every aisle, and when you pick something up, and that's what would take 3 hours, because somebody was watching the footage of you literally walking the store, right, and getting stuff in. So that is but the perspective is, a lot of people are like, oh my God, they're lying. I don't disagree with the perspective. You still got the same experience, more or less. They're figuring out, how can we do this quickly? Instead of writing all this code, how do we get this out the door as cheap as possible to make sure that customers really want it? So that's the same perspective I tell, like, you guys should be implementing something. Let's get this done in 2 weeks. See what can happen, and then we can take it from there. So that's kind of a long-winded way of kind of answering how to build monopolies.
It's funny, when you started talking about Amazon Fresh, I thought you were talking about what they tried before pandemic. Because now they drop on your doorstep in like 12 minutes, it feels like, right? I don't know why they would have gone after a retail environment.
Well, maybe that's why it failed. So, I mean, they haven't discussed why it's failed, but like to your point, like if you can get it, why you even step into a store?
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm just going to follow some of our notes here. So, a lot of the things you talked about, implementation, my theory always, and anyone who knows me knows I think this way, is less planning, more doing. And let's get it done and see how it goes. As opposed to let's try and figure out how it's going to go before we get it done. What's your comment on that? And how does one person do this on their own? It's a lot of our realtors are work on their own as individuals.
So the first part I agree with, like I'm the same way, where and I wasn't always, so believe it or not, I know I'm talking a lot, but growing up I hated public speaking. I hated talking in front of crowds. There was a lot of things I hated, but you understand slowly that like the demons are more in your mind. And I think that after you make the first few mistakes, you're gonna realize this is not that big of a deal. As long as, again, to that last point, they're inexpensive mistakes. I don't want you to have like your check that's supposed to go to for your mortgage payment or anything like that, that you're deciding you're going to experiment something on. And believe me, nowadays, with the apps that are available, it is inexpensive for you to start trying different things. And trying different things does not mean you're reinventing, for example, the newsletter. It may mean that how your subject lines and what you're putting into the newsletter may be different, right? Maybe it's just recording. I know a lot of brokerages assist in terms of, for example, providing newsletters that you could email out. That's great, but you're also making, first of all, like you're getting that support, which is good and is a good place to start. But at the same time, that newsletter, like everybody's book of business is different. Some people may be heavy on the first-time home buyers, others may be heavy on investors, others are moving down, up, left, right, whatever it is, you know your book of business better than anybody else. So as you start using that, you need to start then augmenting it so that you start kind of focusing in on your own thing. And to what you're saying, started by the end of this week, I would say that, you know, you got 2 days, a day, figure out what you're gonna do and jump into it and figure things out later. Now, to your second question where one person, that's a lot of pressure. So it is a lot of pressure for one person, which is why you shouldn't be doing it alone. I think that, who here has a mentor? Yeah, I mean, everybody should have a mentor. I've got like 2 right now, and it changes as your perspective changes, which is good. But everybody has a mentor. Mentor is somebody who shows you, based on their experience in the past, what's happened. So you've got that historical perspective, right? You've got essentially even the, you could say, best practices that they've developed. But hopefully your mentor is very successful and they don't have a real need to go out and kill things. Not that I'm saying anybody should kill anything, but like they don't have a real need. They may not have that same drive, right? So at that point, you need peers, right? You need people around you that you're bouncing ideas off. So I like to say that mentors are kind of like your parents, right? Provided you have a healthy relationship with your parents. And then peers are kind of like your siblings, provided you have a healthy relationship with your siblings, right? Because with your parents, you set the boundaries to stay alive. They've set the boundaries to stay alive and how you're going to keep going and what's kind of good for you. And they've seen what's happened before and they're kind of giving you future guidance in that sense. But with your siblings and your peers, you're trying to figure out like, what can you get away with? And so that's what you're doing with your peers. So you can have your own brand, and I'm not saying that you have to go into business together, but if you're starting off, I mean, if you're just starting off in the last 6 months, a year for new realtors, you should have a conversation with somebody for 15 minutes every single day. And it's somebody else that was starting off. Be like, I tried this, what did you try? Okay, and what's your feedback? If your business is a little bit bigger, right, you go from 15 minutes a day to 15 minutes every week, to 15 minutes every 2 weeks, to at least 15 minutes every month, right? So that you're kind of getting that feedback. Your relationship, you can't do it alone. There's, who's heard of Mr. Beast on YouTube? Okay, there's some controversy around him right now, but if we get past that controversy, he did have some wise words a while back, because somebody asked him, like, how did you grow so quickly? He's like, all these other YouTubers, they're in their rooms alone making these videos, and they're trying to figure out, like, okay, I made this mistake, and they're still growing, but it's just, they make a mistake, and then they kind of fix it, they try it again, make another mistake. But he's like, I was in a room with like 10 other guys or something, and we were all making mistakes, and we were all sharing those mistakes. And so we learned from each other's mistakes. So I didn't learn from one mistake, I avoided 10 mistakes, because I could see what the other person is doing on a day-to-day basis. So I don't mean when I say share mistakes, you hear somebody's mistake afterwards, because sometimes when you talk about what happened before, history changes a little bit, but when you're living it with them, you see what they're doing. So I would advise at a minimum you have one other person, at a maximum you have a group of 2 or 3 people that are consistently working together on a daily basis to figure out what are new things that we can try to figure things out so that we can grow that business. So it kind of complements both. All of you are looking for monopolies, right, over your niche, and you're making mistakes together to figure out how you can kind of grow that business.
Well said. That was one of the power of peer groups, and that's why we've been members of peer groups, because you get to look at different businesses, different franchises, different models, different parts of the world, and you go, wow, that was stupid. I can't believe you did that. We tried that 5 years ago and we fell on our face. And it's funny because we all do the same thing. And I find the real estate industry is a sharing industry. You guys all know, you get the top people in your office and within your company, and you want to talk to them, they'll talk to you. They'll actually come sit up here and do a workshop and tell you how they do it. And they're generally not worried about you copying them because most people won't do it.
Yeah.
But the sharing is incredible in our industry.
Yeah.
And we've had some of the greatest things that we've come up with as a group here. And it's quite amazing. It's available, but you have to be present. And so, you're going to bump into people not online, and you're not going to bump into them on an email. You got to bump into them by coming to stuff and talking to each other.
Yeah. And to what you're saying, it's not even just people are not going to copy. There's so much business out there that I know that if you read the newspaper, like there's only 2 people buying a home. There's still tons of volume, and there's a lot of people sitting around doing nothing.
Yeah.
Right. They're playing with their thumbs. So people who are dedicated, without a doubt, you can grow your business. I know that within our firm, we implemented some of this stuff. We've seen so many law firms that they're like, you know what, we're not doing real estate anymore, we're doing family, we're doing divorces. But our firm actually grew through this time because we stuck to the principles. It's kind of like going to the gym. You're going to feel horrible the first 2 weeks, and you're not going to see any kind of difference on yourself. And I swear I used to go to the gym. I know I don't look like it now. The law school, half the time I was at the gym. You got to just take my word for it. But you have to have the form right. You lift too much, you're going to hurt yourself, but you got to show up every day and you got to lift. And if you have a buddy, a spotter, it makes life so much easier.
Absolutely. So tell me dig into your peers a little bit. How do you work with your peers to brainstorm or generate ideas within your firm?
So our firm, like I said, I'm not a fan of talking to other lawyers. I love lawyers, but in terms of business, I like to kind of see what's going on in the market. There's, like you said, there's a lot of other businesses that have really good ideas that you can implement in your own firm. So our perspective has always been we're a tech firm first and lawyers after, though we're good lawyers, but we'd like to say we want to look at what's happening in the tech space. That's why when COVID happened, we were actually investing a lot of money. I know I'm going a little bit off script. We had invested a lot of money in building our own kind of automation internally, even though the laws weren't up to where we wanted. COVID accelerated that, but we were already there. So we just had to flip a switch and then keep going. Having said that, for example, didn't mean that we didn't make mistakes. Biggest example I would say is lawyers, how they built relationships a lot of the times was when somebody came to the office for the signing, that's when you would talk to them and you'd build a relationship and you'd have a lifelong client. What we saw was digital is very good, but those meetings get cut down from 45 minutes to 15 minutes because there's kids crying in the background. They've got on a lunch break, they don't want to talk to you and they don't remember you at all. And because they don't know who you are, they're just going to be unhappy because something went wrong and the trust is not built there, right? So how we had to get around that, we had to send them emails of our firm. We had to do intro calls so we don't ever have an email that goes out and says, hey, this is what we need from you. Whenever we get a file in, we do an intro call. We say, hey, this is what you're going to expect. And you can talk to us at any time. We have 3 people on each file so that if I'm busy or somebody else is, they always have somebody to talk to on that file. Our limit is within 4 hours, somebody should get back to you. And so to implement all of that, there was a lot of mistakes because the traditional model changed. And so we kind of went that route. A lot of that was adopted by sitting with our kind of peers and saying, what do you do in terms of how you conduct business? So we looked at how Bridgewater conducts business, how they build trust. They're very secretive. I don't know if you know, for those of you who don't know Bridgewater is a hedge fund. I know Ray Dalio's gotten really popular. So we looked at their models. We looked at how Skadden works. Law firms weren't really good to look at, to be honest. Even if you're looking at big law in New York City, they're just very traditional. But if you look at especially tech companies, what is Uber doing? Maybe not look at everything that they're doing. We actually sit down and we try new ideas. So we're constantly trying new ideas, and we fail a lot. So we fail a lot. There's a lot, and then the good stuff, we then kind of move around. So what we do is we have a few trusted partners that will say, hey, listen, I'm trying this. Do you mind because I don't want any realtor or mortgage broker to send us a file. They're like, what just happened here? This is
Surprise.
Just completely out of the ordinary. So we tell them, hey, listen, like, this is what we're doing. Do you want to participate? And we've built trust enough so that a lot of them would be like, all right, there's something here that they're getting at that maybe we don't understand. And so we try to make sure things are right. And then we will implement it once it's good. We will expand it. One of the things, for example, that we're doing that really kind of taken off is we've seen that a lot of realtors, mortgage brokers, everybody wants to make content on social media. Very difficult because it's just a lot of time commitment, editing, all of that stuff, getting that content out. So what we're doing is at the end of every transaction, we actually call provided the referral partner agrees and provided the client agrees, that those are two caveats, we will call them and make a video testimonial, and then we'll cut it up and put everyone's logos on there and send it off because, and here's a mistake that we did. We actually first started off, we made those videos, we said we'd give you the raw footage to the realtors and the mortgage. We'll give it, you can do whatever you want with it. You have full creativity and it's the world is your oyster, go ahead. Nobody did anything. So then we went back to the drawing board and we're like, well, this is not working out. I know they want it because we speak to everybody like, this is good. And they'd like the idea of getting that feedback. It was always good. It's good to share it to your network. But they would not, for the life of me, they would not kind of edit it to make any kind of real videos. And then you look, again, it was our stupidity in the sense that you guys are doing a lot. You can't be video editors. Not everybody has a video editing team. So then we put something together. We say, okay, we could streamline this and make the video for you so that you could upload it. And so that's kind of worked out much better than here's the raw footage, you could do whatever you want. And the reason we thought, so our intention was by giving you the raw footage, you would actually be happier with us because you got the raw kind of the ingredients and you could do whatever creative idea that you have that comes to your mind. But it was the opposite. So we had to then again tweak it and get back because it was not as nearly as successful as we thought in terms of spreading that content, because that was our kind of perspective. Our goal was to get it spread in the network so people were happy. And so once we fixed it, thankfully it's been very good. So that's kind of in a nutshell what we're doing. We're constantly figuring out what are other businesses doing, and is there a small group in our referral base or something that we can try this with to see that if it works or not. And then we get feedback from them because you have to have communication. Had we not had communication with the realtors and we just did this and we're like, oh, this is something great, there's no way we would know that it's not working. Right. So you got to have full kind of insight.
Great example. I'm going to steal your idea, by the way. we have all the ability to do it.
Yeah, no, 100%.
So that's great. And so the client gives a testimonial about Treadstone, about their agent, about.
So what we do is we ask questions about everybody. So we ask questions about ourselves. We ask questions about if there's like a specialist or somebody that's involved. We ask questions about the realtor. And the point of it is to kind of serve several different purposes. It is all done remotely, firstly. So we have some software that I'm not too familiar with, but it can record things locally and it gives you high fidelity videos. And so it's not like a webcam stream. But the purpose is if, for example, a realtor refers us some business and they got that client maybe from a mortgage broker, we can make this video for the mortgage broker as well, and they can give it to the mortgage broker. So they're building more of a sticky relationship
Nice.
with everybody. You're building kind of an ecosystem. It's kind of like Apple, where the iPhone wasn't enough. They had to start with like the watch and the earbuds or whatever it is. So now everything, you're buying everything at a different point in time, and you can't get out of the ecosystem, which is good because their stuff is still good. So it's the same type of stuff that we're slowly kind of putting in, where you want to build an ecosystem around your services so that everybody wants to come to you.
Very good.